Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of PTCGRadio, so today we need to take a look at Radiant Pokémon. And what we need to do is we need to rank all the Radiant Pokémon. There have been 13 released since they first came around in Astral Radiance. Don't forget we did have a few in Pokemon Go. And that means that I think we've got enough now that we can start sitting down and having a look at which are the best. Although I'm going to warn you right at the start here, there is a as far as I'm concerned at least, there is a very clear top three. And after that, it does get just a little bit more muddied. Oh, and actually, before we get going, I should add just a tiny little note here. There are two more Radiant Pokemon that are not going to be on this list. That is Radiant Eternatus, which has been revealed and is amazing. It's going to be high up on the list when we include it. And Radiant Charjabug that haven't been. They are going to be in Crown Zenith. But because that set isn't out for a couple of months yet, because we've not even seen Charjabug, I'm not including them on the list today. When Crown Zenith comes out, I will make sure we do a follow-up video where we have what should be all 15, and they should be the only 15 we ever see. But just as a side note here, we're not including Radiant Eternatus because it's not out yet. It's not out for a couple of months. It's in a set which isn't coming. It's too early, basically. It's too gosh darned early. So let's have a look, shall we? And I'm afraid I'm going to start off, and I don't really want to, but I don't think I have much of a choice, because I need to start off at number 13 with Radiant Steelix. I'm not happy about it, ladies and gentlemen, but I do think Radiant Steelix is the worst one we've seen so far. And look, it's a very interesting card with a very interesting attack, which lets you, for free energy, deal 60 damage, and discard cards on the top of your deck until there's only one card remaining, and deal 30 more for each energy card you discarded in this way. It's a really interesting attack, and I love it as an idea of a meme deck, but the reality of the situation is you need free energy on there, and it needs to be in a deck with a bunch of energy, and you need to be willing to discard your entire deck to do so. So it really is kind of a last-ditch kind of thing. And I know there is a really fun, silly deck to be made with this, but I'm afraid right now I do think it is the worst. In at number 12, we've got Jirachi, and I hate putting it this low, and I am pleading to all of you watching this video, prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong. Because it's got an ability where if it's active and it's knocked out, you search your deck for any free cards and put them into your hand, bearing in mind it will be knocked out coming into your turn, so you'll have those cards to use immediately. And then for 2 colorless energy, bearing in mind you can use twin energy or double turbo energy, either will be fine. You flip 2 coins, and if both of them are heads, instant KO on anything. And please do bear in mind, we have not yet seen the rotation of Glimwood Tangle, which means that you can reflip if you don't get double heads. You've got 2 chances. But the reality of this card most of the time is you don't flip double heads. You're relying on your opponent to try and get a KO on it so you can search for any free cards, but they're either going to be using Gusting with stuff like Boss's Orders, or they're just going to be using Escape Rope to make you switch your active, going after the bench, and not getting a KO while you keep flipping tails. In a perfect world, you get a massive KO, your opponent KOs you back, and you search free cards, but I don't think that's going to happen often enough, and this makes me sad. In at number 11, we've got Hisuian Sneasler. And look, the attack here is terrible, really terrible, but it does let you put 2 more damage counters on poison Pokemon during Pokemon Checkup. And it's not terribly exciting, but extra damage is generally pretty good. And the reality is, if you play a deck with poison, you're probably going to love this. I don't think it's an exciting one, but I also do think it deserves to be in at number 11. In at number 10, we've got Radiant Eevee, and this is one that I've not seen see a huge amount of play lately. But the reality of the situation is that there is still so much potential here, it's unreal. Because it's not the free energy 50, obviously. For a single energy, search your deck for a number of cards up to a number of different types of Pokemon you have in play and put them into your hand. If you've got 6 different types of Pokemon in play, this is searching for 6 cards. That's ridiculous. And sooner or later, someone's going to make a great deck with this. In at number 9, we've got Radiant Alakazam. I don't hate the attack. 2 energy, 20 damage for each card in your opponent's hand. It needs a psychic energy, which is a pain because you might not always be playing this in a psychic deck. And it relies on your opponent having a large hand, but I love the ability Painful Spoons, and not just for the name. Once during your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another of your opponent's Pokemon. Love it. Moving damage counters around can get KOs that you would otherwise not be getting. It can move damage off when you have enough to KO, so you're not wasting damage, just keeping it on the field. Again, it's not seen a huge amount of play yet, but the potential is absolutely there. In at number 8, we've got Blastoise, and I love Radiant Blastoise. Big fan. Now, free energy 170 is a bit meh, but you do have an ability to let you discard a water energy from your hand to place 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, which is where it gets really interesting, because then with a choice belt, that's actually a total of 220, which is a perfect number to get a one-hit KO on the vast majority of Pokemon V, which is actually super duper interesting. So we love this. And yeah, it's a dropping damage. The biggest issue for Radiant Blastoise is it's not the best of the Water Radiant Pokemon. The other one on the list is a fair bit better, but there is still a lot of potential to be had here. In at number 7, we've got Radiant Serena. Again, the attack here is terrible. Many of these that have good abilities have garbage attacks. But the ability Elegant Heal says once during your turn, you can heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. And this is awesome. But the biggest issue is it doesn't prevent KOs, it lets you heal after your opponent has whiffed. And I'm going to spoil the surprise, but Gardevoir, which comes higher up on the list, reduces damage by 20, and the biggest issue Radiant Serena isn't better is because Gardevoir exists. And a lot of the time, it's better to reduce that damage and prevent the KO than it is to try and heal up afterwards. In at number 6, we've got Radiant Heatran. Now, this one we did actually see popping up in decks at the World Championships, which was kind of awesome. Free energy, 70 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Get a few damage counters on, and this adds up quickly. And it actually combos amazingly with Magma Basin, because Magma Basin lets you attach a fire energy from your discard pile to a bench fire Pokemon, and then you've got to put 2 damage counters on them. Which, a lot of the time, not ideal. Radiant Heatran, very ideal. Do this twice, and you've got 2 energy on, attach 1 from your hand, and you're doing 280, which KOs Pokemon V-Star. In Fire decks, there is huge potential in Radiant Heatran. And this is really the part in the video where we move to expect to see them popping up in a fair bunch of decks. Now, in at number 5, we've got Radiant Venusaur, and this is one that I know a bunch of you are probably going to disagree with me with, and I am absolutely fine with this. I am still in love with Radiant Venusaur, and I think it's amazing. The attack is garbage, but the ability says at the end of your turn, you may use its ability, draw until you have 4 cards in hand. Now, for things like Kasui and Arcanine decks, that are, decks where you're trying to run with a 0-card hand, this is an absolute no-brainer. And yes, obviously this sees play in Radiant Arcanine decks, but I just think it's a really good one overall, and I really, really like it. We've already seen it see play in some decks that are very specialised, but I do think it could pop up in some more. In at number 4, we've got Radiant Lucha, and this one, again, terrible attack, 2 energy, 50, but the ability says if it's on your bench, your Pokemon do 30 more to VMAXs. And we've seen this pop up in a bunch of deck lists since it came out, and the deal is very simple. If that extra 30 damage makes a difference and means you get to get a KO on Pokemon VMAX, then this is good and it's going to see a bunch of play, and it really is as simple as that. I adore this in certain decks. But then we get to the top 3, and I do think we draw a line above Lucha. I think Lucha's good and has seen a bunch of play, as have some of the others we mentioned, but I do think the top 3 is a very clear top 3. And I think the 3rd place is very clearly Radiant Gardevoir. The attack, 70 damage, plus 20 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active. It can be nice to punish them for having lots of energy attached, but it's free energy and one of them has to be psychic, so I'm not overly excited. But the ability says that all of your Pokemon take 20 less from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon V. And it really is as simple as that. you take 20 less damage. Let's not forget we've just seen the release in Silver Tempest of V-Guard Energy, and that means that you take 30 less damage from your opponent's Pokemon V. So you can add this up and you're taking 50 less damage from your opponent's Pokemon V, and I assume at this point you see where we're going with this. It's just a way to stop yourself getting KO'd. In decks that are trying to block KO specifically, this is amazing, but it's also just good for reducing damage. It's a clear number 3. Now, in at number 2, I'm putting Greninja, but I know that a bunch of you would probably put Greninja at number 1. I think we've got a very, very clear 1 and 2. I think Gardevoir is obviously 3rd, but I think Greninja and the last one are the obvious 1 and 2. I'm putting Greninja number 2, but I won't be mad at you if you put it number 1, because everything about this card is great. The ability lets you discard an energy card from your hand to draw 2 cards, and we've already seen people playing around with Scoop Up Net in order to reuse it, which is amazing, because as soon as you pick it up and put it down, it's basically a new Pokemon. And then the attack for free energy lets you discard 2 and do 90 to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. But in decks like Palkia that can accelerate energy with its V-Star power, you can basically out of nowhere get this rolling and then do 90 to 2 bench Pokemon, which is going to be KOs against smaller Pokemon, setting up KOs on bigger Pokemon. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And even if you're not attacking with Radiant Greninja, the ability alone would put it in the top 2. Even if it didn't have the attack, this will be top 2 just for the ability alone. And that means by process of elimination, I'm putting Radiant Charizard number 1. For me, Radiant Charizard is number 1. Because it came out of nowhere, and it is both a Pokemon around which you can build a deck, and bearing in mind, Radiant Pokemon are limited to 1 of any kind in your deck. So being able to build a deck around a card you can only play 1 of is in and of itself kind of amazing. But it's also a phenomenal tech attacker. Because the attack for 5 energy does 250. Add a choice belt, that's 280. That's a KO on Pokemon V-Star. But the ability lets you reduce it by 1 colorless energy for each prize card your opponent's taken. By the time they've taken 4 prize cards, you're doing 280 for a single energy. And it could be something like Aurora Energy, so you don't even need to play Fire Energy. We have seen this popping up in a whole bunch of decks, both as a deck in and of itself, and as just a tech for just big damage, or as a fire attacker. And I really do think it depends what you're looking for as to whether you put Charizard or Greninja number 1. But whichever way you look at it, these are the top 2, as far as I'm concerned, by a significant margin. And I think Charizard is number 1 because that has really changed the game in terms of what we can play and how we play. Radiant Greninja, to me, is a phenomenal extra trick for a bunch of decks. But I think Radiant Charizard really changed the way we build decks and prepare for the game, and that's why I've put it at number 1. But I want to know what you think. I want to know which ones you think should be number 1. I mean, if you want a whole list, 1 to 13 would be amazing. But I want to hear from you regardless in the comment section. So go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk Pokemon and card games and Pokemon card games, all kinds of fun things. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can support the channel. You can get bonus podcasts where I answer all of your questions. You can join a Discord and chat with us about Pokemon or anything else. And you can get shoutouts on the channel like the lovely Jelena Renji, who's been a supporter of ours for a couple of months now and seems to be a very lovely person indeed. So thank you very much for all the support, and thank you for being a very lovely person. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.